All right, let's get this started. Excited to have Gabriela Hernandez Garcia, who's in Dr. Adams Wiggins' lab at PSU. And Gabriela is a Build Cohort 6 scholar.
Good morning, everyone. So today I'll be talking about researcher positionality practices within qualitative research methodologies. And to begin off, I want to start off with some introductory points. So it is important to understand that researcher positionality in relation to the insider status can bring on many different benefits, such as collecting vulnerable information from participants in a non-invasive way, as well as the understanding of the significance of that information to those specific communities. And however, there are some debates about the extent of enforcing traditional research standards such as objectivity. To understand this debate, we must acknowledge the historical and continual practices and harms that the research discipline itself has caused to many different communities, which views the researcher as an expert, making them have a status of privilege, and which can also invalidate different ways of knowing from local communities. So this leads into the mosquito analogy of having researchers being mosquitoes flying around, probing at their participants for answers, and eventually biting and leaving sometimes a scar because they have collected all of their necessary information for their research, but they don't really help the community sometimes. So this leads into the goal of inclusion across all disciplines and the research process. And for this extent, inclusion also includes researchers of different identities and backgrounds, as well as research methodologies, which leads into our goals of examining the extent of the insider status in qualitative research when working with underrepresented communities, and to further support researchers in being critically aware of themselves and their research. And for this evaluation and this presentation, we collaborated with a larger study that is identifying Latinx STEM students, that is identifying barriers to Latinx STEM students' experiences here at Portland State. So we have 4 self-identified STEM students, age ranges 19 to 23, 3 identified as female and 1 gender identified as male. And so all of our participants were individually interviewed over Zoom by a Latinx interviewer. And for the purposes of this evaluation, we only analyzed the responses to these following questions. Was it helpful to have a Latinx interviewer to share your experiences with? Why or why not? So alongside with my collaborator for this project, Sandy, we first collected the polar responses, whether it was a yes, it was helpful, or no, it was not helpful. And then we analyzed and coded our responses for any emerging patterns that we saw. And finally, alongside the use of a qualitative codebook, we categorized and labeled the patterns and themes we found amongst our collected responses. Now, turning to our responses themselves, we found the following emerging terms within our participant responses, such as helpful, comfortable, low pressure, and so on, which leads into our identified themes. And then for the sake of time, I won't be reading the actual transcript excerpts themselves, but the themes that we found were a mutual understanding of culture, experiences, and backgrounds, community supporting community, and discomfort surrounding the idea about sharing the same information that they provided us to a non-Latinx counterpart. And then for our discussion and conclusion, our preliminary results suggest that the interviewer's identity allowed for more vulnerable and critical information to be collected non-invasively from our participants, which leads into our limitations of an ongoing data analysis. And however, this presentation continues on the works that many have already continued among the research community, including supporting researchers' positionality influences for the research process, as well as demonstrating the needs for researchers of diverse backgrounds in qualitative research, focusing on underrepresented communities to bridge gaps within our research, And of course, for future directions, research that investigates the insider role itself and how it not only impacts the participants, but also the insider researcher as well, and how they navigate their research with communities that they are a part of. And then here are my selected references. And I want to thank Dr. Carlin Adams-Wiggins for all of their constant support and mentorships, Sandy, my collaborator, and of course the rest of my ROC team for all of their continuous support, and to my family as well. And thank you to both Exito and the NIH for funding this project. Thank you. QR code for the whole list of resources. But yeah. Yeah. So any questions?
Can you explain again how they came up with the term mosquito?
While reading about researcher positionality, I had read this article by this researcher Gershad et al. And they talked about different ways of how researchers can go into different communities, do and collect their research, and then leave. And they compared them both to mosquitoes and helicopter research, how they just fly around and just get what they need and leave without making a true impact. So that's where I got the analogy.
Did the interviewer self-identify as Latinx at the beginning of the interview, or was it only when the question was asked at the end that they confirmed a shared identity?
I'm pretty sure we did disclose our identities prior. Well, we were introducing ourselves. Juliana.
Did you say that you would agree with like the results of like the interview? Like, would you like think like many people would feel the same way?
For me personally, if I were to be part of the study as a participant, I would have also agreed that having a Latinx interviewer would have made it more easier for me to share some things, because again, like the mutual understanding of language and cultural norms, I feel like I wouldn't have to like over explain everything.
I'm curious now that you've been like immersed in this and you're going to other classes and you're reading other things, how has it changed? Like, how do you just look at papers you're reading or studies you're hearing about, things like that?
Definitely. Within my courses, I have encountered different articles that I've had to read about either underrepresented or minoritized communities. However, the researchers writing those articles, after looking them up, the majority sometimes are white, and it's sometimes it feels a little bit weird sometimes reading an article that isn't from those same communities that we're reading about. So there is also the Journal of Women and Minorities in Sciences that is requiring or is encouraging their researchers to submit positionality statements, so that that could also be something that the readers themselves can also be critical of when reading articles.
I was just going to ask somewhere along the lines, in your presentation, you said that you wanted to potentially study researchers that and see how they are affected by this type of understanding. So yeah, I was just going to say, like, moving forward, if you're going to do this research in a different way, how do you think that you would encourage other people to look at research?
Yeah, definitely implementing different ways of knowing from local and indigenous communities, I think, is a big factor to look at research differently, because we already have this predispositioned idea of what research is and what is worthy of knowledge and what that knowledge is valuable of. So definitely looking into how different people, I guess, measure knowledge is important to consider. Thank you.
Aaron, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so next up we have Aaron Tonpoon at Dr. Khan's lab at OHSU.
Alrighty. Oopsie.
Alrighty, so good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Tongpoon, and my research is the effectiveness of mRNA vaccination in preventing COVID-19. This study is also called IV3, otherwise known as influenza and other viruses in the acutely ill. As you may all know, COVID-19 has become a severe issue over the course of the years. However, as time goes on, things have started to subdue compared to initially. So let me give you a brief overview. So what is mRNA vaccination? Well, in a regular vaccine, dead or weakened viruses are used, and once injected into the body, it creates an immune response that allows the immune system to create the antibodies. For mRNA, it's a little bit different. Instead, it sends a messenger RNA to the body to teach cells on how to make a specific protein, a specific spike protein. These spike proteins causes an immune response and creates the antibodies. The antibodies can then bind to the COVID-19 virus, rendering them immobilized. So how is vaccine effectiveness measured? Well, this is an observational study through data analytics, and by observing the percentages and numbers of how many people are infected with, who are COVID positive or negative, we can determine how effective these vaccines truly are. We also study the variants of COVID-19, such as pre-Delta, Delta, and Omicron. So our job in this research is to collect patients who are either COVID positive or negative but show symptoms. We find the patient through a healthcare software called EPIC, where we also see if they qualify to participate in the study. As you can see from the pictures on the left, on the far left, it's a specimen bag that holds a test tube and a nasal swab. The test tube holds a solution that stores the nasal swab after collecting it from the patient, while the picture on the left, on the right, is a specimen transporter. In case we need to enroll a patient who is COVID positive and COVID negative but shows symptoms, we carry two of the specimen transporters so we don't cross-contaminate the samples. Some inclusions consist of patients being COVID-19 positive or negative but show COVID-19 symptoms, and some exclusion criteria is being pregnant, last stage chronic illness, or a specific psychological state. There are way more criteria for inclusion or exclusions, but they tend to be a little bit more specific. So here are the results for IV3. Unfortunately, for what I'm doing right now, with the research with Dr. Akram Khan, we're doing the study called IV4, but results don't actually show until later on into the future. So for now, but what I basically explained to you in the materials and methods section is the same procedure that IV3 would do. And here are the results. It looks complicated, but I'll try to simplify it as best as I can. So a total of 7,544 patients were enrolled in the study. 6,140 COVID negative controlled patients were selected. 1,440 COVID positive patients received IMV, which stands for invasive mechanical ventilation, or have passed away. Only 307 COVID-19 positive patients received 2 to 3 doses of the vaccine. So most COVID-19 positive patients who were vaccinated had respiratory issues or conditions that makes illness worse, such as HIV, leukemia, or lymphoma. 4,020 COVID-19 negative patients were vaccinated with 2 or 3 doses. And vaccine effectiveness tends to increase on younger adults compared to seniors by 3%. The senior age cap is 65, and at the bottom of the results, we have the variants of COVID-19, Delta and Omicron. People who took 2 doses against the Delta variant of COVID-19 have a vaccine effectiveness of 88%, while for Omicron, people who took 2 doses have a vaccine effectiveness of 79%. Overall, for both Delta and Omicron, if you take the first booster, which is the 3rd dose, vaccine effectiveness increases by a significant amount. So for Delta, 3 doses of, for Delta specifically, 3 doses have a vaccine effectiveness of 95%, while for Omicron, taking 3 doses have a vaccine effectiveness of 94%. So most patients were old adults or people with underlying conditions such as immunosuppressions. 2 to 3 doses of COVID-19 mRNA vaccines are 90 to 93% effective among adults with COVID-19 and IMV or severe conditions. Vaccinated patients who passed away with COVID-19 had other underlying issues. Some examples can be severe asthma or any respiratory illness, because most of the patients who were vaccinated but had COVID-19 didn't actually pass away from COVID, but instead just some other illness. Vaccine effectiveness for 98% for patients who took 2 to 3 doses with severe COVID-19 with no underlying conditions. While observing the while observing the data, we'll be able to find new findings for vaccines and strengthen vaccine effectiveness in the future. I would like to thank Dr. Akram Khan and the pulmonary research team for helping me with this research, the OHSU faculty, and of course, Build Exito. Any questions? Yeah.
Any future based on younger adults or children?
Only from patients up above the age of 18. Any patients that are under 18 don't qualify for this study. Yeah.
Yeah, but like, I think maybe.
Wait, sorry, did I answer it wrong?
Maybe she just, I think, asking like if you guys are gonna have any further studies.
Oh, further studies. Oh,
Yeah.
As what I'm aware of, I'm not. No, we will have more studies involving it, but the age, I'm not too sure. Yeah, Carlos.
Like diabetes and obesity as conditions as well.
Yeah, they apply as well. It could be like some examples. Yeah, diabetes, obesity, asthma, maybe some and other like lung issues. Yeah. All right.
Is this something that you think you'll personally continue to study? What's next for you?
So for what I want to do, yeah, I do like studying medicine and learning about how vaccines work is something that I also want to do as well. But yeah, involving with the research, yeah, it could be something I could pursue for. Yeah. Am I done? Or I'm sorry.
How have doing the research made you feel personally about like vaccines?
It was actually pretty interesting because looking at the statistics wise, like on how many people took vaccines and how effective they can be, it brightens my mind that like how vaccines have truly come along the way since COVID-19 has been like, a pretty huge impact. So having them create like a new way to fight off against these pathogens is it's a motivation for me as well. I want to be a part of that study.
Questions?
All right, thank you.
Our next presenter is Cielo Hernandez, and she's cohort 6 in Build Exito, and is also in Dr. Kapan Zoglu's PSU's lab.
All right, everyone, my name is Cielo Hernandez. I'm going to talk about language proficiency effects and the use of complex sentences and then English. I'm currently Dr. Kapan's lab at Portland State University. All right, so what is language proficiency? Language proficiency depends on a variety of things. It depends on the children's fluency, the length of their sentences, the accuracy of their grammar. When do children begin to form sentences? They start early at the age of 5, and they usually start with causal and temporal relationships. Causal relationships are sentences that include because and why, while temporal connections include time. All right, the purpose of the study was to examine how Spanish and English proficiency affects the use of temporal and causal clauses and narratives that were collected through storytelling tests in 5 to 7-year-olds. And also they were bilingual children. All right, methods. There were 45 Spanish-speaking English children, and they were all in either kinder or first grade, and they were also in dual immersion programs in public schools. In order to qualify for this study, they needed to meet 3 out of the 4 criteria, which were low grammatical errors, long sentences enough to read them, and also score above a certain score in the BESA testing, and also have a parents report that indicate that they didn't have any language proficiency barriers. All right, measurements. How is language sample analysis reliable? Language samples analysis was super reliable to us because it was a way for us to measure their speech. And also we measured their speech through greedy retelling tasks. And also they were transcribed and coded in a solid software program. All right, and then this is what I did usually. We coded their language samples, and we would usually put like whatever causal and temporal relationships, we would code it down in each sentence that they did. All right, so results indicated that children's proficiency in a non-mainstream language, which was Spanish in this case, was important when it came to sharing causal information and stories. However, when it came to mainstream language, which was English, it was probably more dependent on other factors other than proficiency. All right, and these are my acknowledgements. I want to say thank you to Build Exito, to Dr. Kamasula, to PSU, and also to my lab partner, Madeline. Thank you.
Can we go back to the picture of the coding?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's hard for us to see it, just say a little bit like what a couple of those lines represent.
Yeah, so basically they had read a story and they retooled it back. And then someone else transcribed it and they went through each sentence. So then what we did was go through each sentence and look for causal and temporal relationships, like keywords, like was like because, why, like a certain timing that they included, and we would put SI1 or SI2, depending on how many of those verbs they used.
Okay.
When you went to the measurements, can you go back to that one?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the reading detailing task? What is that?
Basically, they persons that got their actual sample, they went over to a certain school, to a public school, and they sat down with them and like read them a story, and then they had the kids retell the story back in their own sentences. Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you.
Excited to introduce our next presenter, Denise Lazara, who is a cohort 6 scholar and also in Dr. Emily Hinkle's lab at OHS.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Denise Lazara, and this is my second year with the Exito program. And also, I'm pursuing my degree in public health. In the last few months, I've been collaborating with Dr. Hinkle and Dr. Hernandez behind her. And we've been working with a big group of doctors with this lovely presentation that is called Preparedness for Transition of Care in Young Adults with Sickle Cell Disease. So it's like a mini research that we just started, still in green stages. Basically, sickle cell disease is an inherited blood disorder that basically when normally we have red blood cells, all of us, that move through the body, and then it's made out of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein that moves the oxygen through the body, and a healthy blood cell is one, and that way can move through all parts of the body and move our bodies. But a patient with sickle cell disease, the cell is sticky and hard and kind of like, and turn into a C. So it will like stop all the blood flow from different parts of your body, and that's what is called a sickle. So a little bit about sickle cell disease is that if both parents have sickle cell trait, there's a 25% chance that any of their children will have sickle cell disease, and they can pass it to their children, even though they might not have any symptoms whatsoever. In the United States right now, there's currently at least 100,000 persons with this disease, and it's affected mainly by African Americans, Southeast Asian, Arabs, and Hispanic, and believe it or not, even Native Americans have this disease also. Some of the methods that we use, this is a semi-structured qualitative interview study. So basically we send in the mail interviews, having like an option to interview. And it was a pair of a caregiver or parent with the children. And to qualify, they needed to be between 16 and 21 years old. They were previously diagnosed with sickle cell disease. They were at least, they came for a visit at least one time to the OSSU clinic between the age 15 and 17, and they speak English. We're still working on getting more translation because we know there's other languages that are affected, at least 5. And for the caregiver to be a participant, they needed to be a parent or caregiver, and they also need to speak English. And, a little more about in discussions that sickle cell disease is a rare chronic disease that have currently not cured. We're still working on it. There is a big shift on pediatric, care, once they get diagnosed as a child, there is a lot of care that gets involved, like oncology, hematologist, and other type of specialty. There is a big gap in urgent care during the adolescent time to adulthood. And that's where we're working on to find more information about it, gather data, and present it to these families. And because we don't know where this, all of these patients might get the information, they might get the wrong information, or they might get very old information that is not updated, and that will affect their health being, So that's why we're working on this pilot interview thing, so they will get a proper transition care. The future directions of this research is to help adolescents with sickle cell to find fresh information, fresh resources, updated constantly from our sources. And that way we can also help specific communities to get the proper care on time, especially when they have a sickle cell episode, and informing of the latest medical treatment and the latest resources. They're also creating a lot of all over the state, but mainly in the East Coast, they're creating little groups of communities that are affected by sickle cell disease. And we want to connect, maybe create a network to help them out. I would like to thank my PI, Dr. Emily Henkel, Dr. Tricia Wong, Ariel Hernandez, Dr. Reem, and for their guidance and valuable information. The OSSU Pediatric and Division of Public Health and Hematologists and Oncology, and the School of Public Health, Dr. Decatur Foster, Chandy Dixon, and to my sons, Anselmo and Xavier, for the teenage point of view, for helping me finish this. Here's my research. Any questions? Got lots of questions.
I just want a comment. I really like the presentation. It's so well put together, and then the decoration also went super well. And then also the way they just had the points with it was just so clear and stuff to me. Really good.
Thank you, guys. Marcel?
Yeah, so what is the average life expectancy for individuals with sickle cell disease that have insurance versus those that don't have insurance?
That's a good question. I don't have all the answers for that, honestly. They have a hard life, I can tell you that, it's a very painful disease. They have a lot of, shut down organs, very stiff, joints. So I'm not really sure about the actual age, but I can get back to you on that. Yeah.
I'm curious, so you talked to me back on a slide about how particular underrepresented minoritized communities are mostly impacted by this. Have you come across any research or had conversations with colleagues about how the fact that this is impacting these communities might tie to gaps in research or a lack of funding from research or lack of access to resources and services for individuals?
Well, that is a fair point, and that is true. You know, a lot of, I believe, you know, this is my own private point of view, is that there is not enough testing done, that there is a gap currently of not people that don't have enough, that they don't have insurance. Number one, they will not even have maybe even the means to go to a clinic and they get tested. They will not have the proper care, or they will say, well, my aunt have these, so this is what I do. You know, I just take ibuprofen 600 milligrams and I just swim by it. And they don't know how, they don't know, for example, the fact that, you know, having a sickle cell trait, it will actually go into whatever partner, you know, if their partner has it, they will create a child with sickle cell disease, for example. There is something that is not known. And, you know, me that I'm always in the community and I'm always volunteering, I come across a lot of African Americans that don't know that there's any kind of progress. They know like facts from 1980s, but they don't know anything current.
When do you usually find out that you have sickle cell? Like, what is like the average? Is that information, like, is it something that you test when like a baby's born?
So yeah, so they have a heel prick, you know,
Okay.
when they are born, all babies, you know.
Okay.
So I find out that through the oncologists, hematologists we were working with, and they get, you know, the blood get tested, and they will say, well, you know, you have sickle cell trait, you know. And that's when the care starts getting very specialized, step by step. So this is what you do. If you have an episode, if the child is crying uncontrollably, bring it to us. We know how to take care of it, you know. Anything else?
So looking at the slide with the parents, the alleles, is sickle cell, is it homozygous recessive?
I don't know that word that you just mentioned.
Yes.
My team will answer.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
And it's a pleasure to introduce Jay Portillo in Dr. Zuckerman's lab at OHSU and cohort 6 scholar.
All right, good morning, everybody. Cool to see everybody here finally in person. So the study I'm going to be talking about is called the role of referral coordinators and referrals to early intervention. I've been working with Benjamin Sanders on this project. To set the stage here, early identification and treatment of developmental disabilities is crucial to enable children to meet their greatest potential. And luckily, each state has teams of people who run programs called early intervention, or EI. These programs aim to help qualified children reach the services that they need, like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, things like that. And these programs are subsidized by the federal government under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Now this sounds amazing, right? Sounds great so far. So what's the problem? You know, why does this matter? Well, unfortunately, only 1 in 2 children with developmental delays ever get enrolled into early intervention. Developmental delays is different from developmental disabilities in that they're kind of like the precursors. So they're kind of what let you know that there might be a developmental disability. So you know that this is occurring when a child isn't developing at the same rate as children their age. So with this in mind, we wanted to look at a specific role, which is that of the referral coordinator. They're a largely unexplored role in research so far, and we think they're an important role because from the early intervention side to the first contact with the families, and so we think that this gives them a unique perspective in the whole process. So I'm just going to describe the process real quick. So you can see the boxes represent steps or events in the process, and then the circles represent people or groups of people. So first, the referral source, it can be a doctor, it can be a parent, you know, child services. They need to have a concern about a delay. And so they then initiate the referral and they send it to the referral coordinator. This is the role that we're talking about here. So once the referral coordinator receives that, they review it and they initiate the process of contacting the families. And so they kind of get the ball rolling and they try to set up an evaluation, which is conducted by an evaluation team. And once the child is qualified, they begin services, which I just mentioned earlier. And so our objective broadly was to understand why there's shortcoming is occurring and, you know, why so many kids are not receiving the services that they need. Specifically, we wanted to seek out barriers and facilitators in the referral process. And, you know, so what makes it more difficult? What makes it more easy to complete this process? Additionally, we wanted to determine what's missing that could improve referral completion. And so to achieve this, we recruited participants using snowball sampling of, you know, referral coordinators around the country. And we did this with the help of prior contacts of previous study that Benjamin Sanders conducted of early intervention leaders. So the next step in the process was to conduct, record, and transcribe semi-structured qualitative interviews. And the next step is to conduct thematic analysis. So far, this is still an ongoing project. So we have preliminary data. And so current themes include for barriers, you know, conflict, scheduling, working parents. So a lot of parents work during the time that services are happening. So, you know, they can't make it or they can't even answer the phone sometimes. Next one is importance of information accuracy. So sometimes the contact information is not up to date. And so a lot of people just don't even contact the families. And then the last one that I'll discuss for barriers is worst case scenario parents. Those are parents who are not very invested. You know, they were mandated by someone to be there. So then they're not really like, they don't see it as a priority. It's more like a check in the box for them. On the other side, facilitators include like building connections with families. You know, the more rapport that there is with families, the more smooth the process goes. And then the best case scenario parents, they're the ones who are invested and they want to see their kids and the services to make progress. So with all this in mind, a future direction, this is where I'll conclude. We want to create training programs for referral coordinators. As I mentioned before, the states all kind of run their own programs and they're done, you know, there's no uniformity. So it's kind of hard to tell what is actually working and what's not working. So with the program, you know, with everything that we're seeing here, we could create a program where they can just follow it and, you know, add things that they can get help with. So like support staff for doctors, more communication with doctors saying like, hey, we know you're overwhelmed, but maybe having some assistance filling out these forms can help. And then more education for the doctors, for the assistants, and for families, especially those that are not very invested, could help them become more invested. I want to take the time to thank, like everybody else, Build Éxito. I want to thank Benjamin Sanders for putting the whole study together and for his guidance. When I was selecting a lab, I wanted someone who could be a mentor. He's gone above and beyond that. So thank him for that. Dr. Catherine Zuckerman for her guidance and for welcoming me in her lab. And of course, the whole Catherine Zuckerman lab for their contributions. And that's it. Time for questions.
Is there any research that shows that there could be, like, due to cultural or religious backgrounds, like, that can be a barrier as well?
Yeah, there is research that's kind of like talking about like stigma in the different cultures, and it also like one recently that I was looking at was like the family's perspective and how sometimes they feel like they are insulted in a way, like they don't feel like they're not being treated with the same level of like, you know, they think that they're dumber, so like they don't really like explain everything how they should. And then one thing that I looked at specifically in this, so that I'm looking at, is like with Latino families, like how much does influence from like family or, you know, the people around them do they play? And admittedly, I thought that they were going to have like a negative role. Like You know, I see sometimes that some people say, well, my child is doing the same thing at that age, like give them time, you know, so they prolong the process. But what we're seeing so far is that they're actually really supportive, and a lot of the referral coordinators see it as a good thing that families are so involved.
For future steps and trying to get more of a standardized process going, is there going to be collaboration with referral coordinators and other organizations that handle things like this?
So far, this is just an idea. We haven't really, you know, set something concrete, but I think that'd be a wonderful idea to kind of like collaborate with referral coordinators. And actually, after our interviews, we asked them if we could contact them in the future. And, you know, whoever says yes, we'd love to work with them further, get further input by them. Yes.
This might be out of scope of what you've looked at, but is there research on outcomes for individuals with like early developmental delays who do and do not get those EI services, say when they're adults? Like, is there research showing, wow, if you get that intervention early, it really makes a difference in particular areas?
I haven't looked specifically, but we do know that the earlier they get the services, the better. I mean, because there's so many different types of developmental disabilities and delays. You know, it could be speech, it could be mobility is a big one, but definitely all across the board with all of them. I don't know specific stats, but it does improve significantly, especially the earlier on they get the services. Yeah.
You said that like every like program, EF program is like different, right? And you know, it's like harder to see what works. But wouldn't it be like easier to see what works? To see like, because like they're all so different.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say is like if there was, this is why we're trying to figure out now, like this study is helping us out to figure out what is working and what is not working. So the fact that they're all different, you're right, it helps us gauge what's working, what's not working. And so that's basically the study is like what's working and what's not working. And eventually we take all that data and we can, you know, have a program that we take out, all right, like this is definitely not working and this is really working. So how can we promote this or, you know, take this away and create a.
Yeah, so there's no like data like to like see that, like any studies previously kind of like on this?
Not as far as this role is concerned, not very much. Like this role has not been covered very much in the whole process, which is interesting to me because I think it's a really important role since they're the first contact with the family.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I was curious if this is something you're like interested in studying further. Where are you going next?
So you and I have talked on the side. I'm actually wanting to study clinical psychology. I was thinking about public health and social work for a little bit. So that's a big reason why I joined this lab, but something just kept calling me back to psychology. So there are things that I can take from this moving forward, kind of like, you know, why so many kids are not, it's the same thing with like children being seen as like, or people overall being seen by psychologists. Like I did some job shadowing at OHSU and that's something I asked is like, how long are your wait lists? You know, and sometimes it's upwards of a year, you know, so people just drop out and don't get the services they need. So there's a lot of correlation, even though they're sort of different worlds. All right, well, no more questions. Thank you.